Good afternoon and welcome to the International Conference Europe and Russia on the Balkan Front. My name is Giorgio Fruscione. I'm a research fellow at the Italian Institute for the International Political Studies in charge of the Balkans desk. I'm also the editor of the report Europe and Russia on the Balkan Front, Geopolitics and Diplomacy in the EU's Backyard. You can download it for free from the ISPI website and you can find the link also in the video description. Before starting the event, I would like to thank all our partners, GLOBSEC, the Belgrade Center for Security Policy, the Kosovo Center for Security Studies, and the European Policy Center from Belgrade, as well as their representative and all the speakers involved. This event, as well as the report, is promoted with the support of the Italian Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation, to which my thanks goes. The conference consists of two sessions. The first one will tackle the aftershocks of the war in Ukraine in the Balkans and how it reshuffled regional geopolitics. The second will focus on the EU plan for the normalization of relations between Kosovo and Serbia. Between the two panels, there will be a conversation with the EU Special Representative for the Belgrade-Pristina dialogue, Miroslav Lajcak. So now I leave the floor to my colleague Eleonora Tafuro Ambrosetti, who will moderate the first panel while I'll moderate the second. See you later and enjoy the event.
Thank you very much, Giorgio, and welcome to all of you to this first session of this very, very timely conference. So I remember a few years ago, a well-known researcher, Balbona Zanelli, wrote that the European Union was the only game in town in the Western Balkans. Well, looking at the reality today, looking at the interplay of different external players that are very active in the region, Russia first, China, Turkey, and other Gulf countries, we can rightly ask ourselves the question, is it really so? And more concretely, how do geopolitical turmoil and the war in Ukraine especially affect the region and its integration with the European Union? This will be the topic of our session. And we have very excellent speakers to discuss this complex issue. Let me introduce them to you. So we have Andrea Cascone, who's the Adriatic and Balkans Director at the Italian Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation. Juraj Kuruc, Fellow and Project Manager of the Program on Future of Security at GLOBSEC. Milena Lazarevic, who's the Program Director of the European Policy Center in Belgrade. Last but not least, Senada Sabic, who is a Senior Research Associate at the Institute for Development and International Relations in Zagreb. So I think one question that I would like to start with goes to Milena. And I would like to ask her to tell us how the war in Ukraine, or better said, Russian war against Ukraine, has reignited the enlargement debate and process, because we see, of course, new candidate members. We see also controversy about a possible facilitated process of integration for Ukraine. So I would like you to share with us your expertise on European integration and tell us more about the proposal that your think tank put forward recently, a staged accession process of the Western Balkans. Could you elaborate on that? I would ask all the speakers to answer my question very briefly in order to leave some floor for the debate afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you, Eleonora. And yes, indeed, with the Russian invasion of Ukraine, definitely the enlargement policy has been raised quite significantly on the EU's political agenda. And we have seen actually the increase in the political relevance of the and perception within the EU member states of the political relevance of the enlargement policy even before the war in Ukraine, with the discussions of Europe's strategic autonomy and fight against the malign influences of external non-EU actors. But definitely the war in Ukraine, the Russian war against Ukraine has brought this to a completely new level. And as you mentioned, with the advent of two new candidates, definitely the rules of the game need to be somehow, let's say, revisited and further innovated, and in order to motivate really the reforms in the candidate countries, but also to motivate the acceptance of new members among the existing member states. We are aware that there are many concerns among the EU member states regarding the enlargement, and some of those concerns are related to the actual problems in the functioning of the EU decision-making procedures, and also in the, I would say, dysfunctionality or inadequacy of EU's current mechanisms to keep its own member states in check on fundamental issues such as respect for fundamental values of the EU enshrined in Article 2 of the Treaty of European Union. So our proposal, which actually was published in October 2021, so several months before the full-fledged Russian invasion of Ukraine, but which anticipated the need to further innovate and work on enlargement policy and to help break this impasse, which obviously the enlargement policy found itself in. Our proposal actually serves to achieve both of these goals. On the one hand, motivate the reforms and provide additional incentives for reforms in the regions and in the countries which are acceding to the EU, which are in the process of EU accession, but also to find ways to provide at least some temporary ways of going around the problems with which EU member states see with the further enlargement. It is a comprehensive proposal. I cannot go into details here, but just to say a couple of, let's say, main points about it. First of all, this proposal builds on the structure of the new methodology. So it doesn't propose to overhaul the new methodology, but actually to build an additional, I would say, floor on the house that the EU is already building with the new methodology. So it's taking forward some of its elements, such as the ideas of advanced integration or advanced participation of candidate countries in the work of the EU, but also providing higher level and more, let's say, more substantial financial support for socioeconomic reforms in the region. And the proposal does that by offering a way forward so that the accession process takes place through several stages. And the importance of these stages is the predictability which they're giving to the process. So instead of talking about opening and closing of numerous chapters or clusters, those processes related to the bureaucratic exercise of opening, negotiating, and closing of the chapters would still be there. They would still be in the background of the process, but what would be in the forefront of the process is entering into these stages in which a country that is improving in its compliance and readiness for membership, the country unlocks certain benefits which would normally now be reserved for members only. And for example, the first stage, which a country can enter once it is moderately prepared for membership across all clusters in terms of the rating of the preparedness, which the Commission does on an annual basis. A country which reaches this level unlocks additional benefits in terms of selective institutional participation in the work of the EU institutions, in observer status, of course. But of course, this would give the representatives of the candidate countries a significant possibility to socialize with their EU counterparts and participate in the creation of collective responsibility. And the other main benefit would be access to much higher funding, something much more similar to the structural funds of the EU, which these countries would normally enjoy once they join the EU. But in this case, we have proposed for these funds to be opened to, or something similar to these funds, emulating these funds to be opened already in the pre-accession stage in order to support socioeconomic reforms. Then in the next stage, once a country reaches the level of 4, so good level of preparation across all clusters, it unlocks additional benefits in the sense that it gets additional generalized observer status across EU institutions, the Council, Parliament, Commission's working groups, comitology committees, etc. And it also reaches an even higher level of access to EU funds under, of course, very clear criteria, but again, further stimulating socioeconomic development and closing of the socioeconomic development gap in the time when it is the most needed in this pre-accession period. And then, of course, once a country is fully prepared for membership, so it has, full level of compliance across all clusters, and it closes actually all chapters in the background of the process, in the backstage of the process, it signs and expects the ratification of the accession treaty. And here we have proposed a transitional third stage of the process, which we have called the new member state stage. And in this stage, we have foreseen mechanisms which would help alleviate the concerns of the EU member states with accepting new members. Those limitations are mainly related to some exemptions to the use of veto power in the Council for the new entrants. For example, making sure that new entrants cannot abuse the veto power as new players in the EU institutions. But at the same time, and at least equally importantly, what we have proposed is for also a transitional period in which the reforms, especially the fundamental reforms, the governance, rule of law, democracy-related reforms in these countries are still observed, although they are new member states, with the view to prevent any backsliding from happening. So basically, this would be some sort of a very intensive monitoring procedure, which in case a country regresses, backslides of the reforms, would be followed by certain reversibility mechanisms in order to sanction those violations. And of course, then after the expiry of this transitional period of, say, 10 years or 15 years, the new member state becomes conventional member state in every sense of the word, whatever that would mean in the future, because our expectation is that this kind of an enhanced enlargement policy would at the same time be followed or accompanied by the work on internal EU reforms, which would hopefully happen simultaneously and perhaps even lead to some sort of a convergence between what we have proposed in stage 3, for example, limited use of veto powers, and internal reforms of the EU, which have, to an extent, similar objectives of facilitating and streamlining EU's decision-making procedures. I will stop.
Thank you, Milena. Yes,
I think quite complex, but I will stop here since I have spoken for around 6-7 minutes. So.
Okay, no, but it's really interesting because you can see, especially in the first part, it's an incentive-driven process. But then, of course, the accession and the membership process doesn't depend on candidate members only and their willingness to integrate and to make efforts to abide by European law. It also depends on current member states. And I think your second and the third stages of this process acknowledge this limitation, let's say, very well. So I would turn to Andrea Cascone, because speaking about current EU members' willingness to enlarge the EU. I have a question on the role of Italy, which is often positioned itself as one of the more enthusiastic members of the EU in regards to the enlargement. So I was wondering, is anything changed after the war in Ukraine? How is Rome relaunching its diplomatic role in this muted security context?
Thank you very much. And let me thank also, first of all, ISPI for the wonderful idea to organize this conference, which is very timely. Well, I wouldn't say relaunching, but rather intensifying our role on Western Balkans and EU enlargement. We've always been very active in the region, and our commitment in Brussels about the EU enlargement process of the Western Balkans has always been steadfast. And you're absolutely right. I mean, the Russian aggression against Ukraine has actually confirmed what Italy has underlined for many years in our discussions in Brussels. And that is that the enlargement process is by far the most relevant geostrategic investment of the Europe for the European Union. Now, we're firmly convinced that what happened on February 24, 2022 is a defining moment in our history, which has sparked a new momentum for the EU enlargement, not just with Ukraine, Moldova, and Georgia, but also with the Western Balkans, which are in the waiting line since 2 decades. In fact, this year, I'm sure you all know, we will celebrate the 20th anniversary of the often recalled Thessaloniki Declaration. Now, after 20 years, we must sadly acknowledge that things have gone a different way compared to the expectations rising in Thessaloniki. If we look at what actually happened, only Croatia has joined the European Union meanwhile, and there is uncertainty about when other Western Balkan countries will eventually become part of the Union. This uncertainty has generated a twofold negative effect. First, it has slowed down the pace of reforms in the region. Local leaders feel less and less the push to move on with reforms that are increasingly painful because they bear cost. They bear cost also from a political point of view. Nor, and this is the second aspect I would like to underline, they feel the pressure from their public opinion and civil society, who are more and more disillusioned about the concrete perspective of becoming part of the European Union. Now, in 2020, it was recalled also by the previous speaker, the EU embarked in a process to revise the methodology on enlargement. Italy was actually in the front run of the process, advocating a revision of the methodology that would re-energize the process with a win-win approach by creating the right incentives for the countries of the region to move ahead with the reforms. The 2020 revised methodology approved by European Council in March of that year includes the possibility to adopt measures of so-called accelerated integration. In other words, concrete steps that would enable candidate countries to participate to EU works already in early stage before completing the accession negotiations. As it was recalled also, I mean, the staged accession is trying to build up on this notion, which is already there. It's in the methodology. And the interesting thing is, because of also the war in Ukraine under the Czech presidency in the second half of 2022, we have launched an important debate among the 27 on how we could implement this part of the new methodology. We need, in other words, now to complete that work by elaborating concrete proposal. It is extremely fascinating, the proposal that was presented as a staged accession. It has a lot of good ideas. The merit of showing clearly the fact that the countries from the Western Balkans would start integrating in the European Union already while they're negotiating. And this is a very important aspect which I would like to underline. It's one of the lessons learned from the first round of enlargement in 2004 and 2007 is that a country does not become a full-fledged member state just by completing the negotiation. The process of being part of the mechanism, the process of participating in the works of EU is essential. It's crucial also to meet those values which are the core of the European project. Now, also in this debate, which has started under the Czech presidency, Italy is providing an active contribution and has strongly supported actually the presidency. We definitely think that the credibility of the European Union in the Western Balkans depends ultimately on its ability to deliver on the promise made 20 years ago in Thessaloniki. A promise which is very clear, it's a promise for a better future that can be fulfilled only by moving forward with European integration of the Western Balkans. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think it's very important insights that you have shared with us. And so we have seen the members and the EU members and the EU institutions. We have talked about the candidates. But in this process, in the enlargement process, there are also spoilers. And this is what I would like to ask to Juraj. Is there any spoilers you see in the region, like those external players that we have mentioned earlier, and especially Russia? In particular, can we say anything about Moscow's role in the region after its war on Ukraine? How is the war impacting on Moscow's presence in the Balkans? Juraj, you're muted.
It had to happen to someone. Thank you. Eleonora, thank you very much for the floor, and thank you very much for the invitation to this to today's conference. As your question suggests, Russia has indeed spent a lot of money in the Balkans and time for building up an entire network of their own trolls, spoilers, individuals, and organizations. The prospect of the war, and then the war itself, has made a lot of these funds dry up, at least temporarily. Now the chances of a Russian loss in Ukraine raises the prospect of these funds drying up completely for good. But that doesn't mean that China and Turkey are likely to disappear as well as a result of the war. Now, on the nature, this is a very good point to mention the nature of Russian propaganda, or the way that this machine works. Unlike in the old Soviet days, the new modus operandi is not trying to persuade anything of anyone. There is no message that Moscow is the best, follow our lead. Its aim is to make facts simply drown out in a torrent of disinformation and half-truths, to destabilize the notion itself that a fact as such exists. In a true Orwellian fashion, the truth is not that 2 + 2 is 4, or 3, or 5. The truth is that it is whatever the fact is, that whatever Moscow says it is at that time. And the fact that it can change moment to moment just underlines this fact. The war in the Balkan region, to get more specific, is causing several things happening at the same time, and these have been happening for quite some time. And there are some comparisons that could be drawn with the Visegrad 4, for example, on the way that backsliding towards or away from the core values of the European Union are happening. So whatever the attitudes were before the war made them more extreme. So if you were pro-Russian before the war, now you're blindly so. And if you were pro-European, well, you cannot accept any kind of middle ground anymore. With the exception of when there was middle ground, kind of thinking, well, there is kind of like a balanced point. Maybe the Russians have a point, but, European Union, they're still richer, so we want to be kind of sort of with them. Now everyone sees that Russia is an aggressor. There's no more talk of Russia being a neighborly, brotherly, Slavic nation that can come to help us. And also any kind of notion of Russian victimhood from the past, that's been erased. That's no longer even possible to be discussed. That is the effect. There is no middle ground, and no more room for discussion between these two extremes. Every Balkan country has a variation of this polarizing extreme and what that means. At the same time, the actions of the EU member states and the EU itself are making the prospects or the idea of EU integration, in fact, more and not less attractive. Example there I would use is the post-COVID recovery funds. For example, are an order of magnitude greater and implemented way faster than the usual European structural investment funds that still exist. Another thing is Ukraine. It is now clear, at least in our Central European region, that Ukraine has to gain full membership, that there is no alternative, no second track, no other option that there exists, in our opinion, because without it, the recovery of Ukraine, the post-war recovery, will be next to nigh impossible. And so then the question is, well, how should the West Balkan 6 react to this? How are they to take this after 20 years of an accession process? The answer there is that, the answer, as well as an institutional reform, then becomes a must and no longer a conversation point that can take decades to arrive to. So here I would end my intervention. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Juraj, and thank you also for pointing out that the polarization that is happening in the public opinion of several Balkan countries, but also European countries. Italy is a perfect example of that. I would like to turn to Senada. Let's stay with the role of Russia in the region, but let's focus on Bosnia, because Bosnia and Herzegovina is the one country that Russia is always accused of meddling with, using some fractures, some cleavages in the political landscape to encourage secession and to destabilize the country. So do you agree first with this view? And if so, could you tell us how effective are Moscow's efforts, especially after the invasion of Ukraine?
Thank you, Eleonora. I also will start by thanking ISPI for organizing this event and you for moderating. And I also would like to congratulate you on the publication of the new study, Europe and Russia on the Balkan front. I'm speaking the author on Bosnia in this publication is my colleague, excellent young scholar, Samir Beharic. So I invite all of you to read this whole publication with also Milena's and other colleagues who have contributed to it. In this discussion, therefore, I'm not going to repeat what is and reiterate what is written in the study. I would like to underline and thank you for singling out Bosnia-Herzegovina in the Balkans as being basically a proxy for the Russian, also another assault on the West. I think Bosnia-Herzegovina is really deeply destabilized by the war in Ukraine, or by the Russian aggression on Ukraine. Although a scenario which was debated or likely early last year, so after February 24th, has been avoided. However, the country is not stabilized, and what I see is further security deterioration. Basically, the capacity for internal domestic reform that would stabilize the country is lacking. If we think about the Russian influence, although Milorad Dodik is identified as being the main Russian person in the Balkans, I think the weight or the source or the point of reference is still Serbia. And Republika Srpska in Bosnia-Herzegovina would be a different actor if Serbia had a different policy towards its neighbors in relations with the West, and then its approach to Russia, China, and other actors. So I think that the task for the European Union and the West in general is to have honest and structural dialogue with Belgrade, which takes into account policies that Serbia has been projecting towards its neighbors. So unfortunately, I'm sorry to say this, but I think I'm fully right to draw such conclusion that Serbia is not an actor of stability in the Balkans, as has been earlier, and sometimes we still hear this from some Western officials. I think it's not for the benefit of the citizens of Serbia and not for neighbors of Serbia, the policies that the current government is pursuing. And I think everybody has the right to choose which kind of policy they want to pursue, or what kind of decisions they make. But I think the European Union should make clear that you are free to choose, but every choice has a price, and that you cannot continue to fund and have direct budgetary support, for example, and fund development projects in Serbia, while Serbia is openly undermining the stability in the region and basically, also diverting from its own European future. So European citizens and European taxpayers are paying for projects in Serbia, in a country which now has less than 50% of population supporting the enlargement. I'm sorry to say so, and I really would like people like Milena to have more success. And I think they need our support, because I think Serbia really belongs to the European family of nations. But what we see now, we should be honest also with ourselves. And my criticism for the European politicians is that they don't want to name things by their name. And they keep basically trying to find nice words for things that should be told the way they are.
Well, thank you. I will then ask immediately Andrea Cascone to react to this to this assertion that the EU has to have a more probably a more severe role in towards Serbia. But to Andrea Cascone, I would also like to ask something about economic integration, because one of the main assets of external players, such as China especially, but also Turkey, is boosting trade and infrastructures, pumping money and investment. So I would like to ask Andrea Cascone to comment on this important critical issue, and especially how can the EU counter these actors' investments through, for instance, economic policies. And if you don't mind, Andrea, I would like also to ask a question that has arrived from one of our viewers, Anon, is also asking what the EU could do better to tackle disinformation, because in the end it's all part of the same strategy to bolster influence, right? We have economic investments, we have disinformation, and we have larger security strategies. So floor is yours, Andrea, and you have also a few minutes to answer all of these questions.
Okay, let me see if I can answer all the questions, including the one by, the remarks by Senada on Serbia and what the EU should do. Well, on Russia and China and Turkey as well. On Russia, I don't want to spend much of time, I think, but I really would like to encourage everyone to read the excellent essay by Vuksanovic in the report that has been published by ISPI, because it gives a real picture of what is Russia's role in the Western Balkans. Sometimes I found it's a bit overstated in some presentation. The truth is that, especially from the economic point of view, Russia leverage in the Western Balkans is much more limited than what appears. When it comes to China, China is a bit more subtle, because the way they work, it's through trade mainly. So it doesn't come to the surface as much as it is, but that doesn't mean it's less problematic. Although also in the case of China, I think there's a tendency usually to overstate, the relevance of China in the Western Balkans. The reality is that China is not so, it's active in certain areas, Serbia, Montenegro, but overall not in the region as much, because also the Western Balkans is not a central part of their Silk Road strategy. For Turkey, it is a fact that they're extremely active. They have also long historic ties with some parts of the region. So it is a player. It's a fact that we have to take into consideration. And it would be simply naive to think that all these actors all of a sudden disappear. Now, what should do the EU to counter, the activities, especially of Russia? I think the answer is very simple, and it's to do exactly what we did over the past year since the war started against the Ukraine. And that is, first of all, strengthening the resilience of the region by making sure that the economies in the region do not suffer from the crisis, multiple crises that now this war is generating. Let me make a couple of good examples you did over the past months. First, by approving an energy package of €1 billion for the region, which is for 90% is direct budget support to the country, which has helped all 6 countries to mitigate the prices for companies and families. Another good example is the association of all Western Balkans to the common platform for purchases of natural gas, LNG, and hydrogen. So that gives also a sense that EU stands with the region. It's ready to play its part when it comes to assistance and making sure that there is no socio-economic impact of the war. But the other important thing is delivering on the enlargement. And let me say that the 2022 was finally a good year for enlargement, because we managed to finally approve the opening of accession negotiations with North Macedonia and Albania. We granted the candidate status to Bosnia and Herzegovina. We unlocked finally the discussion for visa liberalization in Kosovo, which eventually will come into force since November 1st, 2024. So these 2 legs are extremely important. Strengthening the economic resilience of the region and moving ahead with the enlargement process. And this to answer also to the question that came from the public, yes, absolutely. Countering disinformation is a crucial part of the EU strategy. We have been raising our efforts in the region, but this has started even before the war, because we have had this issue of Russian disinformation running high in the region also during the pandemic. And that's why since May 2021, the EU debate has been mainly focused on what we call strategic communication. How do we make EU more visible? How do we make civil societies in the region more aware of what all things we do? And there are a lot of things we do. EU remains the main economic partner of this country, the main donor of these countries. Finally, on Senada remark on Serbia and EU. I think when you read the progress report of the Commission about the situation in Serbia on rule of law, fundamental rights, justice, I mean, it's very honest, it's very straightforward, it clearly says what are the shortcomings. The issue is there, how do you concretely make Serbia on its path to improve its standards? And again, I mean, here I'm still convinced that yes, you need open and frank discussions with them, but you need also to create right incentives to move forward. And this is somehow starting to give some initial results, which of course, I mean, needs to be to build up, because we had this reform approved on justice sector at the end of 2021, which was finally a good reform in the right direction. But of course, there's a lot of work to be done. And on this respect, what I wanted to underline is that from a geostrategic point of view, the war in Ukraine is offering us a unique opportunity, an historic opportunity to finally trying to push Serbia more in the camp of EU and more in the camp of the Western values. It is up to us to play smart, to make sure that this is an option that Serbia sees with the right incentives and sees it as as a positive option and makes the right decision.
Thank you so much, Andrea. And I would like to turn to Milena again. I don't know if you want to react to this discussion about Serbia. Unfortunately, we have 10 minutes at most to finish our session. I don't know if you have any remarks on this, because I think this is a crucial debate that we should be having as European members.
A few words only. Basically, I do agree with Senada's diagnostics. Serbia today doesn't look doesn't really look like an EU candidate country, not from the perspective of the respect of the EU's values, full positioning on the EU's side with respect to the war in Ukraine, although Serbia's position is a little bit more complex than sometimes is understood, considering that Serbia has supported the EU's position in the United Nations General Assembly. It has also voted to expel Russia from the United Nations Council on Human Rights, etc., but it hasn't imposed the sanctions. And in my opinion, Serbia's leadership has been buying time. And I think that this is something that is inevitably going to come and can be expected, but definitely it has been procrastinated to the maximum extent with EU's acceptance of this situation. But I would just say that I think that the EU has very well defined the Gordy's knot around which many other issues in Serbia's relationship with the EU and with the West in general is, and with Russia, on the other hand, is based on. So it has actually, over the past 6 months or so, it has prioritized and it has stressed much more the resolution of the Serbia-Kosovo dispute and normalization of the relations than focusing on the imposition of the sanctions. I think that the EU has recognized that the main lever of Russia's influence in Serbia is basically its support for Serbia's position on Kosovo through the United Nations Security Council, and it is actively working to help create a long-term solution for this issue, which of course is extremely complex and we cannot expect it to be solved in a very short period of time. But if Russia's main point of leverage is in that way undermined and dissolved by the EU, I think it will become, and at the same time, as Mr. Cascone rightly pointed out, the EU is providing a lot of assistance, not only to Serbia, but to the whole Western Balkans for the energy transition. So I think that when these two aspects are taken together, I think this opens really the door for Serbia to be much better aligned with EU's positions in the future. Of course,
okay.
Just
sorry, Milena,
for sentence, because if I don't finish the sentence, then it is not a complete thought. Just to finish by saying that, of course, when these two problems are resolved, we will still be left with probably the main and the biggest problem, which is the nature of the government in Serbia, the state capture, corruption, functioning of the democratic institutions. And I think that it will be really the main challenge for the EU to question these values in Serbia in the right way, in a credible way, and to help Serbia's civil society and democratic forces to take back democracy in Serbia. Thanks.
So, sorry to interrupt. Of course, it's a very fascinating discussion, but unfortunately, we have to wrap up. So I would like to give the floor to Juraj and Senada for very brief, please, 1 minute remarks on what you think are the top 3 security threats that are present in the Balkans in the short and medium term. Juraj, you go first.
In a very short way, I do not expect the war to happen anytime soon. We just are not seeing any kind of actual build-ups for this. So I think we are okay for now. However, it's not impossible. The war in Ukraine made it clear that should Russia prevail, the way of solving conflicts by means of violent conflict is again on the table instead of a regional development and active involvement and regional integration. War, and especially war on weaker neighborly nations, is again something that bigger states will consider. Another big threat is polarization that was already mentioned. it may have been started and precipitated by Russian malign influence, but it's no longer supported just solely by Russians, and that would be overstating their influence. However, I think it will be increasingly difficult to stop it and somehow bring it back. And the only way to end ethnic conflict is make sure that boundaries become irrelevant. And the only way to achieve this is European integration. There is no other project that could do this. In terms of other security threats like terrorism, I don't think that's on the table anymore. Not really. I do foresee a small uptick in violence in regards to returnee fighters that went to fight in the Ukraine. Those that survived, that is, but that's for medium term at best. So here I would now, minding the time, I would end my intervention here. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And Senada, I would like to ask you to be as brief as you are. Thank you so much.
I will want to repeat what Juraj said in terms of polarization and the domestic reaction to the aggression on Ukraine. You asked me in the first round on about Bosnia and Herzegovina, and I didn't say much. I think if we think of Bosnia in the context of prospective EU membership, we have to think of a country, what kind of country can become and can qualify for EU membership. And, Bosnia and Herzegovina still is suffering, I can say so, the effects of the war, which ended nearly 3 decades ago. And we have to accept the responsibility also of the international community, which has created this structure. It's not all the local and domestic responsibility. So I think the task for the European Union is to get out of dichotomy, either war or Dayton. Because Dayton Peace Agreement is a constitution. I mean, it contains a constitution with which Bosnia and Herzegovina can never become a member of the European Union, because this constitution discriminates against the very citizens of Bosnia and Herzegovina. So the European Union should help Bosnia and Herzegovina upgrade the Dayton Peace Agreement so that it creates foundation for a functional, stable, and prospective EU member state. I'll end with this.
Thank you so much, ending on a positive note. And I really would like to thank you, all the speakers, and looking forward to seeing the other important sessions in this conference. Goodbye.
Good afternoon. I'm very glad to have this conversation with Mr. Miroslav Lajcak. Miroslav Lajcak is the EU Special Representative for the Belgrade-Pristina dialogue and other Western Balkan regional issues. Thank you very much, Mr. Lajcak. I know it's a very hectic period for you. You are preparing, next Saturday is actually a meeting between the President of Serbia and the Prime Minister of Kosovo on for the finalization of the EU plan. And actually, my first question to you is precisely on this plan, because on February 27th, Kosovo Prime Minister and the Serbian President agreed that no further talks are needed on the text of the plan. But the High Representative, Josep Borrell, said that more work, I'm quoting, more work is needed to ensure that what was accepted by the parties will be implemented. So my question to you is, can you please tell us what will the EU do to ensure that the plan is implemented? Please, Mr. Lajcak.
Yes, thank you very much. Good afternoon. Thank you for your invitation. And I would also like to thank you for organizing this discussion, because the geopolitical situation has changed. EU's understanding of its role in the Western Balkans has changed, has become more strategic, more political. But I can also say that you can feel it more in Brussels than in the region. And it's really important that we convey the message that EU is now ready for the Balkans, probably more than the Balkans are ready for the European Union. So understanding that the door is open again is extremely important. Now to your question. Yes, the high-level meeting we hosted together with High Representative Borrell on the 27th of February in Brussels was a good one. Was good by its atmospherics. It was so far the best discussion between President Vučić, Prime Minister Kurti. Not easy, but very open, very honest, and emotional but respectful. And also, I would say probably the deepest discussion. This was their 6th meeting altogether, but as I said, when it comes to the atmosphere and to the substance, probably the best one. Then when it comes to the results of this meeting, I think we have achieved not a small thing, namely that both leaders agreed that there is no need to discuss the text of the agreement on normalization anymore. That means the text is closed. And as you know, we have published the text on the website of the European External Action Service, so everyone can see what's in there. I don't think many of us would bet our money 6 months ago on Serbia and Kosovo agreeing to this text. So it's not, as I said, it's not a small thing. However, to have it implemented, we need to know exact sequencing of steps. We need to know timelines. We need to know who does what and by which date, so that we turn this text into a legally binding commitment. And for this purpose, I and my team have also drafted implementation annex, which I shared with my partners, President Vučić, Prime Minister Kurti, in December. And but since we had the discussion on the agreement itself, there was no real discussion on this annex. But now, after the agreement is accepted, we are focusing now on the implementation of the annex, because this is really, as I said, the key element to make it work. And for this reason, I visited Pristina last week, Thursday and Friday, 9th and 10th of March, and I'm just back from Belgrade. I was there on Monday and yesterday, and I left this morning. And the main purpose of my trip was to hear the comments of our partners on this implementation annex. And this mission was achieved. I received their comments, both from Prime Minister Kurti and from President Vučić. And today and tomorrow, we are now working on these comments, and we are preparing, let's say, new consolidated version of the annex, which incorporates everything that can be incorporated from the inputs of the two partners on the basis of our original text. And this should be the basis of our discussion in Ohrid. And if we succeed on agreeing on this annex, then we have the deal.
Great, Mr. Lajcak. Of course, we all cross fingers, and we are pretty sure that everything will be fine for the meeting in next Saturday. So, but if everything goes well, I mean, what do you think the geopolitical impact of this agreement is going to be in the region, and particularly when it comes to the Russia's presence or influence on the region? Do you think that this plan can somehow reduce, tone down this Russian influence in the region?
Well, you may remember that the second half of last year was spent in crisis management. We had 6 serious crises in 6 months, 6 important deadlines. Each of these deadlines was really bringing the risk of serious violence. And each next one was more serious than the one before. October, November, December, when the Serbs walk out of the institutions in Kosovo and then build the barricades and spend almost a month on barricades, 3 weeks for sure. So this is not the situation we want to see. You can forget about normalization when you are fully focusing on crisis management. So that's one thing. The situation is not normal. And my message to the EU member states at the beginning of this year was, we need to change the trajectory from the crisis management, a negative one, to the forward-looking. That means focus on normalization. Now we are on that trajectory. Since the new year, we are fully focusing on this process. And this accepting this agreement would mean normalizing relations between Kosovo and Serbia, which is a huge thing, because this is a crucial problem for the entire region. Not only because there are Serbs and Albanians living in every country in the Western Balkans, but also because of the fact that the lack of normalization of relations between Serbia and Kosovo blocks the normal successful regional cooperation, blocks the implementation of basic freedoms of freedom of travel, freedom of doing business, freedom of studying in other countries of the region. So that means accepting this agreement would mean a huge relaxation in the relations between Kosovo and Serbia, would send a very positive signal to the region, and of course would send a very important message with regard to the European future, because let us not forget that both Kosovo and Serbia have written in their documents, contractual relationship with the European Union, that their path towards the European future goes through the normalization of relations between the two of them. And yes, that would also mean more European Union and less space for third actors, and Russia in particular, to meddle into the region and to create chaos. Because right now, it's very clear that Russia sees the Western Balkans as its territory B, where they can create chaos as to this, like weaken our unity and our focus on support of Ukraine. So stabilization of the Western Balkans in security and in European integration terms has become more urgent since the 24th February last year than ever before. So it really is something that affects every citizen in Kosovo and Serbia, in the Balkans, but it also has a geopolitical dimension.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lajcak. Unfortunately, we have to stop here. I know that you have a very heavy schedule. Thank you very much for being today. And of course, good luck, if I may, for the meeting on Saturday.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
My
All
pleasure.
the best to you.
Thank you so much. So now let's move to the second session, Kosovo-Serbia, where a new dialogue is needed. So basically on the same topic. And I leave the floor to my colleague, Giorgio Fruscione. Thank you. Giorgio, over to you.
Good afternoon and welcome at this second panel of today's international conference, Kosovo-Serbia, where a new dialogue is needed. Before presenting the panelists, I would like to personally thank both Miroslav Lajcak and Antonio Villafranca for their inspiring conversation. So in this session, we will tackle the same topic, that is the EU plan for the normalization of relations between Kosovo and Serbia. It is, as we hear, it is an extremely topical subject, as next Saturday, Kosovo Prime Minister Albin Kurti and Serbian President Aleksandar Vučić will meet in Ohrid, North Macedonia, together with the EU official for finalizing the implementation annex of the EU agreement. This agreement and the overall Kosovo issue has been widely analyzed in the ISPI report, Europe and Russia on the Balkan front, geopolitics and diplomacy in the EU's backyard. So you can download it for free from the ISPI website and let me know your feedback. So now, without further ado, I will introduce our guests. Ambassador Michael Davenport, head of the OSCE mission in Kosovo. Ambassador Davenport, good afternoon and welcome.
Good afternoon.
Maja Bjelos, senior researcher at the Belgrade Center for Security Policy and one of the authors of the report. Maja, dobar dan and welcome.
Good afternoon to you as well.
And Mentor Vrajoli, Executive Director of the Kosovo Center for Security Studies. Mentor, Mirdita, and welcome.
Good afternoon.
So one of the topic regarding the EU plan is and one of the topic of the negotiations has been the Serbian community in Kosovo, and its integration has been one of the most critical elements, let's say. It has been foreseen in the so-called Brussels Agreement of 10 years ago. So my first question, and I will be clear before that we will not speculate about the EU plan, but my first question is for Ambassador Davenport. Ambassador, from an OSCE perspective, what will be the main challenges for the future integration of Kosovo Serbs into Kosovo institutions? And do you believe that there are some differences between Serbs living in the north and those living south of the Ibar River?
Well, thank you, Giorgio, and first of all, thank you for inviting me to join this discussion, and greetings to all the colleagues and participants. There clearly have been challenges with the integration of Kosovo Serbs into Kosovo institutions, and no doubt there will be future challenges. Will there be differences? There have been differences between the way this has worked in the municipalities south of the Ibar as compared to the north, and no doubt the challenges do look different, especially now with regard to the northern municipalities. I think maybe a point to make to start is to say that the integration of Kosovo Serb officials and the community generally into Kosovo institutions has been a significant positive outcome, both from Ahtisaari, of course, going back further, but also from the Brussels agreements. And it's maybe worth pointing out, which is sometimes overlooked, that in municipalities in the south, Kosovo Serbs are participating in political life. Kosovo Serb mayors are continuing their functions in the 6 municipalities with Kosovo Serb majority. Municipal assemblies are continuing to function pretty much as before. And with regard to the Kosovo police, of course, Kosovo Serb officers continue to perform their duties. The deputy chief of police is a Kosovo Serb. Kosovo Serb officers, there was a graduation of cadets from the police academy, now the public safety academy, last month, where Kosovo Serb officers also graduated. And with this latest round of recruitment, which was launched a month ago or so, there are, I understand, some out of about 100 applicants. There's something like 60% Kosovo Serb participation. With the judiciary and the prosecutors, of course, the position is somewhat similar in the south. But of course, we're talking about much smaller numbers there than with the police. But what we have seen is a major challenge. The withdrawal of Kosovo Serb police, judges, prosecutors, also mayors withdrawing from their functions in the 4 northern municipalities, most members of municipal assemblies as well. This is a major challenge, and it's a challenge to future integration, of course, and it's important to recognize that it does reverse that significant progress that we saw over the last year since the first agreement of 2013. It's been a major achievement to bring Kosovo Serbs increasingly into a unified, increasingly inclusive police and judiciary, and of course that's an area where many of us have played a part in trying to bolster that integration, make that integration real rather than just cosmetic. And of course, the OSCE has played its part in all of that. I think right now the challenge primarily is political. We are seeing with the judiciary and the prosecutors, we're seeing that the Judicial Council and the Prosecutorial Council are keeping the door open. With the Kosovo police, that's no longer the case. The door has at least formally closed as of first half of December. We are picking up indications that many of those who withdrew are saying informally that they would actually like to return to their previous jobs. We see calls from some members of civil society for that to happen. But of course, I think we all have to realize that this will not happen without a political climate which favors that outcome. And then, of course, we come back to what we were just hearing from Miroslav Lajcak, and so much depending really on how things go in Ohrid on Saturday. Looking a bit further ahead, which I think your question was inviting us to do, I think the sustainability, if integration is to be taken forward in the future, and whether that's through returns or whether it's through some other sort of formulation, I think the sustainability of the integration will depend on a number of factors. One is certainly political will. There has to be the political will to make it happen on all sides. Another is leadership. Leadership pointing in that direction and demonstrating that this is in everybody's interest. Certainly, what has been crucial over the last few years has been joint training and joint education, where many of us have played a part, including the OSCE, of course. And I think looking at maybe a bit further ahead, what is lacking is joint educational basis. The police academy, the public safety academy, has always been open to candidates from Serbian curriculum schools, and that has been crucial to sustaining the integration with new cadets coming in from non-majority communities, and of course language, because the younger generation of officials coming forward, whether it's for the police or judiciary or other public bodies, they do not know one another's languages, even one another's official languages, and this is certainly a blockage, an obstacle for the future sustainability of integration, I believe.
Thank you, Ambassador, and I agree with you that this topic is highly political and is a victim of politicization from both sides. So, by following question would be for Mentor Vrajoli. I would like to ask him, as he said, is a quite critical element of any future agreement, the Serbian community in Kosovo. So, Mentor, I would like to ask you, what have been the main security concerns for the government of Kosovo regarding the establishment of what was called the Association of Serbian Municipalities, and what are the security concerns regarding the establishment of this administrative entity, and how could they be addressed?
Thank you, Giorgio, for giving me the floor. As you are already aware that Kosovo did have for a long time a concern regarding especially from the discussion on formation of the Association of Serbian Municipalities. But to analyze this, it's very important to see in which context we are talking about. As Mr. Davenport mentioned, that Kosovo did start the process of institutional building based on the ISPI plan, and also, which foresees a very liberal approach when it comes to institutional building with high level degree of multi-ethnicity endorsement. In the other hand, Kosovo did sign this agreement with Serbia in 2013, which is ratified by our parliament, which states that Kosovo should establish the Association of Serbian majority municipalities, which in a way it takes responsibility for the following governments to follow on the commitments that have been taken. Of course, not without the concern. We still haven't seen or haven't have a proper discussion regarding what does the Association of Municipalities of Serbian majority municipalities mean, because in a way the discussion regarding to this mechanism haven't gone into the civil society or into public discourse. Usually the opinions have been quite pragmatizing. In Kosovo side, their concerns were related to the fact that this have been seen as a stepping stone towards what we see now in the Republika Srpska, which to some degree it might be problematic, also because of some impact that some of the arguments in the past have, especially the argument 2015, which despite having some positive outcomes regarding the disbandment of parallel structures which operated in the north, it resulted in creating this Srpska, which in a way has problematic when it comes to state building, when it comes to integration of the Serbs, and when it comes to Serbian community, which in a way represent a step backwards when it comes to integration of Serbs. The fear is that the empowerment of these Serbian state structures in Kosovo would further strengthen the influence of Serbia towards a Serbian community, or a repression in a way of Serbian state towards Kosovo-Serb community, pragmatizing further the process of integration of Serbian community in Kosovo. And I think that these are legitimate concerns when it comes to the discussion related to association. We have seen very limited discussion also from Serbian community in general, like both from civil society and others. What does association contribute when it comes to the process of integration of Serbian community in Kosovo? When it comes to reconciliation, it is more of talk of having this horizontal coordination among the Serbian community, but not much when it comes to debating regarding the what could this association could contribute on the integration of Kosovo. So I think that this discussion could be happening in the near future, especially taking into consideration that Kosovo is in the verge of signing a new agreement, and the process of this agreement, if it happens in Saturday in Ohrid, it will have some action plan, and one of the topics which is foreseen to happen is also the establishment of association of Serbian municipalities. So if this is the case, then I think that the process should follow on discussion. I think that especially the majority community in this case should see the benefit from the association. I don't think that the association should be perceived as a threat towards majority, and this doubts that the majority community have could be faded if there is a proper dialogue when it comes to the aim of Serbian community. And also, if we see that the purpose of this mechanism is to empower Serbian community within Kosovo, especially from the Serbian state influence toward them, I think that that could be beneficial, because that could accelerate the process of their integration and the process of reconciliation, which haven't happened due to this political problem to the level that it was desired. So let's wait and see what is going to happen with the dialogue that is going to take place on Saturday.
I agree. Let's wait and see, and let's hope that we can hopefully have an agreement, and an official agreement on Saturday. And after hearing the concerns of the government of Kosovo, I would like to hear also the other side. So I will ask Maja Bjelos. So, given the fact that the Serbian community in Kosovo is one of the main national questions for Serbia, is at least this is the way it is presented by Aleksandar Vučić, by President Aleksandar Vučić. I would like to ask you about the reaction of Serbian society to this EU plan, because President Vučić has presented the EU proposal as a kind of ultimatum from Brussels, and so my question is, how has the Serbian society reacted to this plan, and are there, in your opinion, expectation or disappointments?
Thank you, Giorgio, for your questions. I would start by saying actually that in my personal opinion, I think this is the EU proposal, and accepting the EU proposal by both leaders is an important step forward. And that we have seen that both leaders can at least agree or discuss together without making any new crisis. So
that's also important to see, because previously we had leaders engaging in also very harsh rhetorics, but in creating local incidents and leaders that occupied international attention as well in the previous not only months but years. So it's also positive to see that leaders from Serbia and Kosovo can sit together and peacefully discuss how to find solution. Of course, this would never happen without now more significant pressure from the US and the EU together working on this. What is important in this plan and what is the novelty for Serbia is that Vučić agreed, although he didn't sign, because that's important for Serbia, for Serbian president not to sign any international legally binding agreement, but he nodded and accepted Kosovo independence. He accepted the national symbols, accepted what was agreed before, that Serbia will not block membership of the Kosovo in international organizations. But all of this happened on Monday, on 27th February, but without loudly saying to the Serbian public that it really happened. So it's quite strange because I believe that majority of population in Serbia still doesn't know what Serbian leadership agreed to, because what is communicated to the public is that the Serbian president explained to the public what he didn't sign and what he didn't agree upon. He was talking about that he didn't accepted recognition, UN and NATO membership for Kosovo, and he even said that Kurti, Prime Minister of Kosovo, didn't accept to establish association. So there was, in a way, manipulation of information or giving the information in a piecemeal manner, but not really explaining objectively what has happened. So when it comes to the reaction from Serbian public, before even this meeting on 27th of February, around, I would say roughly 1/4 of the society supported the EU proposal. But they communicated it quite clearly that support to the EU proposal is not blanco support, and it's not support to Vučić, what Vučić actually expected to happen. And the main argument is that leadership, especially leadership in Serbia, wasted too much of our time through the negotiating process. So there is like one part of the society that has no longer understanding or time for leaders to be engaged in endless negotiations without making a difference, without making a result. So there is a strong reaction from one part of the society that current leadership needs to accept the agreement and implement it and finally close the Kosovo chapter. There is also part of the conservative intellectual and political elite that strongly opposes to the proposal. However, what we have seen that they don't have strength to organize mass protest and to mobilize population in order for the leadership to reject that plan. We have seen also that the government, through other like mediators, is attacking currently that conservative elite. What is also visible in Serbia is that long time ago Church was against Kosovo recognition, against any plan. Currently, the Church is co-opted or silenced and accept this proposal. Then I would again underline that majority of the population didn't notice that something significant happen because of the strict media control in Serbia, and because there is no objective information. What is currently missing, therefore, I would argue that not only in Serbia, but I believe in Kosovo as well, what is missing is effective communication campaign to translate previous nationalistic and mythological rhetorics about Kosovo in Serbia and in Kosovo about association. That association is not Republika Srpska, and to translate this nationalistic rhetoric and narratives to normal political dialogue at the institutional level and societal level, because this is also quite important, and it didn't happen in Serbia, although there were attempts in 2017 to organize the so-called internal dialogue. Also, what is very much important, in line with what I said before, is actually that several speakers before me and even Mr. Lajcak mentioned that actually this proposal, the EU proposal, was brought in completely different geopolitical context. So this proposal is directly linked to the EU's need to make this region more secure and stabilized and to decrease Russian influence. What I would argue that is quite important in order for implementation to succeed at the level of the communities is that we need to move from security agenda and stability agenda and even stabilocracy, so by supporting stabilocracy, to supporting democratization and the rule of law in order to sustain in the longer run this implementation, because there will be a lot of challenges. But that process of desecretization in both countries is needed in order to move forward. Also, what I find important, population in both countries deserve to live better and to reconcile. But I would argue, because I have that also luxury, and I'm and I'm advocate for more democracy and more human rights to the countries, that there should be no appeasement to autocrats and nationalists, although the support of the citizens is very much needed.
Thank you, Maja, and I personally agree with all you said, in particular when you said that let's cut the support for stabilitocracies and autocrats, and let's work together for improving the democratization process. And you also mentioned the role of the church. I don't want to speak about that, but my next question for Ambassador Davenport regards the religious sides of the Serbian Orthodox Church, because in Kosovo, because those monasteries and those churches have been considered the reason making Kosovo a kind of holy land and for all Serbs, and building so-called Kosovo myth, and so also increasing some nationalism and nationalist rhetorics regarding the Kosovo issue. So I don't want to enter into details with this, but my question is, do you think that there will be security concerns for the sites of the Serbian Orthodox Church in Kosovo, and how will the OSCE mission address them?
Thank you very much, Giorgio, for that question. First of all, I'd like to second what Maja just said in the broader context. I think it's relevant to your question as well, which is the importance of putting the emphasis on supporting building of institutions and consolidating the rule of law. I think, in a way, in Kosovo at least, we now are in a very different phase from a few years ago, where previously it was a question of building institutions, in some cases from scratch. It's really now more about consolidating the institutions and strengthening institutions of the rule of law, and also continuing with that reconciliation agenda which Maja referred to, which is really challenging and enhancing the understanding between different communities, including between non-majority communities in Kosovo. But specifically on your question, of course, there are always security concerns. I think it's important, though, to keep the specific concerns related to specific communities in perspective. So the OSCE mission is always closely monitoring security incidents around Kosovo, and we monitor in particular in that context security incidents affecting religious sites and communities. And what we observed over the last couple of years is that there are continuing to be incidents affecting religious sites. Not just those of the Serbian Orthodox Church, but also other religious sites. When you look at the figures, for example, the first half of last year, first 6 months of last year, you see that there were 20 incidents that were recorded affecting Serbian Orthodox Church sites, and 20 affecting sites connected with the Islamic community. Overall, that was slightly down on the same period for 2021, and overall we've seen a slight decrease also in the period since then, though we obviously aren't in a position to make more recent comparisons. The sort of things that you see for sites of all communities are burglaries. Quite often we see, unfortunately, burglaries, stealing of sometimes quite small amounts of money, sometimes slightly larger sums of money. We also see damage to gravestones, cemeteries. We have worked as the mission very closely with local communities, with the Serbian Orthodox Church and municipalities, to put in place protective measures, including basic things like fencing around graveyards and CCTV cameras to act as a deterrent, which can be very useful indeed. But I think it's important to see this. To see that you ask about security, I think it's probably important to see security in the broader context. And it's not just about the sites; it's also about people feeling safe. One of the things that is very important here is in the context of the Serbian Orthodox Church, is the status that the Church enjoys, the Church, the Serbian Orthodox Church, as you know, it exists in Kosovo legislation that derives from Ahtisaari, but it also exists and is protected under, for example, the legislation on special protective zones, which the OSCE mission has a particular responsibility to monitor the implementation of, not least through our role in support of the European Union as co-chair of the Implementation and Monitoring Council, which has not met recently because of the difficulties in the relationship between the government and the Serbian Orthodox Church. The Kosovo police has a role in that as well, in terms of acting as the primary presence to protect cultural heritage sites, with a special unit for that purpose, with special training. Of course, KFOR has the role at Visoki Dečani, which is an exception to that. And the OSCE mission has a responsibility in monitoring, but also reporting on incidents and drawing those to the attention of those who can take action in this area. There is a law, a draft law, which has reached the Assembly in Kosovo on religious freedom. This is a law which has been worked on for many, many years, as I'm sure everybody's aware. It's now with the Committee on Human Rights in the Assembly. And that law, if it were enacted, would give not just the Serbian Orthodox Church, but also the Roman Catholic Church and other religious communities specific status, which is important because this also would have a beneficial effect for those who are, for clergy, for example, in the case of the Serbian Orthodox Church. There are difficulties at the moment because of the lack of official status when it comes to holding bank accounts, when it comes to permits for residence for clergy. These things can be overcome at the moment with a certain amount of patience, but the law would give that status which is necessary. I don't know whether that's what the Article 7 in the text that we've seen that has been agreed to is referring to in terms of status. But that perhaps remains to be seen when we see the implementation annex after, as I hope we will, after the 18th of March. In broader context, the mission produced a report last July on cultural heritage protection in Kosovo with a whole raft of recommendations for different Kosovo institutions primarily involved in cultural heritage protection. And these are not just about security. They include recommendations on security, but they're also about the wider protection of cultural heritage. And, for example, better management of cultural heritage, inclusion of communities in the development of management plans. And there are pilot projects which are underway, some of which the mission is supporting on development of management plans with participation also by young people in developing those plans and actually making them a reality. So I think this is the sort of broader picture, which will crucially depend, of course, on the political context as ever when we look to the sustainability of that sort of approach.
Thank you, Ambassador Davenport, and we will arrive to the political context. But before that, I want to ask one more question to Maja, because what we heard from Ambassador Davenport, it's the reality of several multicultural communities that used to be the normality in the Balkans. So my question is that concerning both the eventual establishment of the Association of Serbian Municipality and the destiny of these multicultural communities in the Balkans. So do you believe that multicultural communities will have no more chance and futures in the region? And do you think that the eventual creation of the Association of Serbian Municipalities will lead to new territorial autonomies in the Balkan region?
Thank you for your question. I would provide answer in a broader context of the implementation of this agreement. Because the way I see the association, because I've dealt with the police integration and integration of civil protection corps into the Kosovo institutions, I see the association as a further step into integration of Serbian community in the Kosovo. It's unfortunate that it was communicated as such, that will be territorial autonomy in New Republika Srpska, but also the leadership in Serbia contributes to the narrative, because in the previous not only years but decades, unfortunately, well-being of Serbs in Kosovo was not placed at first. It was always about territory and status. So discussion about territory and status often undermines human rights agenda, often undermines discussion about multicultural society. But what is the biggest problem currently? Also, the level of trust between Serbs and Albanians within Kosovo, but also Serbs and in Serbia and Albanians in Serbia, but also between two countries. There are many levels of these relations that are currently problematic because of the very low level of trust. So that's the one thing. So in order for this plan to work successfully, the political leaders have to stop with the nationalistic rhetoric and invest more in trust-building measures in order to create multi-ethnic societies. But there are many other challenges to the implementation. I personally believe that implementation should be swift, transparent, inclusive, and not oppressive, because what we have seen before, and there is general feeling that we already lost a lot of time. So we shouldn't lost 10 years from now in order to see the implementation, the real implementation. But from previous experiences, we have also noticed that, for example, integration of police officer in Kosovo police didn't at the end brought a greater sense of feeling of security among Serbian community in Kosovo, or integration of prosecutors and justice, and didn't resulted into more justice for the community in Kosovo, because they're struggling still with some court proceedings and decisions that cannot be implemented in Kosovo. So we have to, with this plan, we have to overcome this and not to repeat others, experiences from the past. But also in a longer run, I think both society have to have very frank and open discussion that is quite challenging. And that's for Kosovo. Is it vision of Kosovo a mono-ethnic society or multi-ethnic society? And then how minorities in Kosovo will exercise their rights in future. That's for a long term. But for Serbia is also what is the vision for Serbia and for Serbian society? Where are we? What kind of society we want to build? This is the answer. Political leaders don't dare even to start discussion or to provide the answers to us. And I believe this is quite important if we want to speak then about normalization of two countries and societies. But these societies have to have clear vision about who they are, where they want to belong, on what kind of values they want to build their states, institutions as well, because it's quite important. What we are seeing is that constantly leaders from Serbia and Kosovo are negotiating, but implementation should happen through the democratic institutions. So democratic institutions at the end should be responsible for implementing this plan, future agreements. Otherwise, all what is agreed within the process will be treated as imposed and will be oppressive, but not inclusive, as I said, because that's why I stress transparency, inclusiveness at first, and not to lose any more time.
Thank you, Maja. And I have to move now to the last question for Mentor. This is more a geopolitical question, and regarding the agreement. Do you think that this new agreement has the potential to give a new course to the relationship between Pristina and Brussels, and in particular to in contributing to fill the gap of credibility among Kosovo citizens toward the European Union?
I think that the agreement does have great potential to for both countries to move towards key processes, especially towards European integration processes, which are both for both countries as proclaimed priority. We hope that this fear of switching from this securitized agenda to the more rule of law agenda, as Maja mentioned, does not stand between the progress and failure to move ahead. We hope also that this process is going to be sincere, because the more the sincerity this process has, especially when it comes to the action plan that is foreseen to follow the agreement, I think that both countries will go quicker towards their aspiration, and also the issues that are real and that need to be solved, and a lot of issues have been discussed also during this session, could be solved quicker. What is very important is that the end beneficiaries do see the results from the agreement, and usually those end beneficiaries are mainly in Kosovo, because Kosovo is directly affected in much more levels when it comes to the agreement between Kosovo and Serbia than Serbia itself. Kosovo has been quite hectic when it comes to the ability to build relations due to the power that Serbia and Serbian supporters had through non-recognizers. And therefore, I think that the more the willingness from Serbian part, the easier it will be for both countries to reach their aspiration. As for Serbia, it would be an easier way towards European integration, but also for Kosovo, it will allow for this process to happen, and for the communities inside Kosovo, especially for Serbian community who have had a process of disintegration, especially the last 5 or 6 years, could be another opportunity for them to be integrated, to have a better future into Kosovo, which for now, I think that we understand that they stand in quite difficult position, both from the fact that they could not be integrated much in Kosovo institution, but also from the fact that they have been not listened by any of the parties that have been part of this process.
Thank you, Mentor. And we are already running out of time, but maybe we can answer just one question that arrived from the audience. Massimo is asking, what are the main motivation behind Serbia's disruptive role? Is Serbia doing this for the sake of internal politics or for expansionist reasons? Maybe Maja, you can answer that.
Well, I will try to address Massimo's question. Thank you for the question. What is the main drive? Well,
days about this big one.
What is the main drive? I'm not. I don't believe that the main drive, for example, is for Serbia to accept this deal will lead to like some imperialistic expansionist politics. It's really opposite, the other way around. So I hope that this plan, but once it would be objectively presented to the citizens of Serbia, will lead to discussion where are then the Serbian boundaries, what kind of Serbian society is now without Kosovo, where do we belong, what kind of, on which values we want to actually build our society, and so on. It will perhaps, that's something what we expect, that moving from Kosovo issue will then open other issues within the civil society. Many expect that something spectacular will happen in Serbia. Nothing is happening at the moment. No huge internal domestic shifts will happen. More specifically, because we have very strong, consolidated one-party regime that controls the foreign narrative and the political situation in Serbia. So this is not there is disproportion of power within Serbian society at the moment. So we don't expect any kind of big shifts and changes. And certainly, I don't see it as because international public and experts speak a lot about Serbia's U-turn. So with this deal is Serbia is moving to the west. There were a lot of discussion about Serbia's U-turn during the pandemic, for example, that Serbia was turning to China. Then when Serbia accepted the Washington Agreement, then some discussed, it's finally Serbia moving to the US. Then when the war started, well, it's not the case. We are moving to Russia, so we are still little Russians. I believe that with this plan, the political leadership in Serbia recognized this is the last, train. It is the last moment that Serbian presidents will, I would describe as like a camel, go through the eye of a needle. So this is the, last opportunity for Serbia to do it, because circumstances has changed. And what we have seen is that I said that there should not be appeasement to leaders, because in my opinion, everything that they agreed on February, they could agree in 2013. Because certain elements of these agreements were already agreed in 2013, but not implemented. What is then now needed is to actually, not waste. And I stressed this so many times, but because of making the point, there should be no wasting of our time to actually wait for this annex or the other agreements and so on, because we are entering in a phase that if we lost this momentum 2014, there will be so many elections happening in Serbia at the EU level, at the level of the US, and we are still in the context of the ongoing war in Ukraine, where we don't see when and how will it end, and what kind of impact it will have, for example, at this dispute. But what I said, I don't think. I don't support Massimo's idea that this agreement will lead to major shifts within Serbia or expansion of Serbian influence over the Kosovo in the next period of time. It should be other way around.
Thank you, Maja. Let's first see what happened on Saturday, then we can have a more comprehensive picture of the future of the relation between Kosovo and Serbia. We are out of time, so we cannot make more questions. We received a lot from the audience, so I will thank all of you for being with us. Ambassador Davenport, Maja Bjelos, and Mentor Vrajoli, thank you for being our speakers today. Our institute will continue to monitor the situation in Kosovo and between Kosovo and Serbia, so more updates will come, and thank you again for being with us.
Thank you.